Good evening, guys. Welcome back to another huge, with a capital Y, episode of Triggered. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight we're talking with Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama. Senator Tuberville doesn't have the typical career politician background, certainly not of most senators. He was a very successful college football coach, the head coach of one of the major programs like Auburn and Ole Miss, and I have a feeling this one's going to be interesting. We can talk about some of the great rivalries in sports, the difference between rivalries in pro sports and college, a lot of stuff, as well as strategy, both on the gridiron, in life, in politics, and how that all works. But before we get into that, let's get on what's on everyone's mind. The hashtag disaster of the Ron Destablishment announcement yesterday. DeSantis didn't launch with a rally of fans, maybe because, as evidenced by even when you listen to him, he couldn't find enough people to be interested in it. Instead, he decided to announce on Twitter Spaces before he headed to a cocktail party with his donors at the Four Seasons in Miami. Here's how his big announcement kicked off. Check it out and listen for yourself.
Now it's quiet.
As I said, it was a hashtag disaster, and it took a long time for Elon Musk to apparently figure out how and what was going on, and it took two charismatic billionaires like Elon Musk and David Sachs to carry DeSantis through this, where he basically read like an op-ed about what he was going to do. But I think what I noticed most about this whole failure to launch was, without the visuals, because it's an audio-only program, you realize just how sort of nasally and effeminate his voice is. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get rid of that thought now that it's been sort of isolated. You know, when you're on TV and you got visuals, you get a little distracted. But go back and listen for yourselves. I don't mind sending you there because it was that bad. This failure to launch is probably a sign of things to come. DeSantis is going to regret running. A poll came out today from Iowa showing President Trump, might add, up by 42 points. That's a state where haven't even historically, it's always been a little bit of an issue, right? Even for Trump. It's a little bit more destablishment-y at times, I guess. And we're going to see more of this, especially when we find out the truth as opposed to what's sort of been put on there by the swarm of sort of paid online DeSantis influencers. You see what they're doing, and once you actually put out the facts, I think a different image is going to emerge. Ron wants people to think that he's like Trump light or something like that. He's not either on policy grounds or personality. Trump has the charisma of a mortician and the energy that makes Jeb Bush look like an Olympian. The policies of a DC swamp rat, because we've seen the flip-flops, right? You can pretend you're MAGA, but Ron still can't answer what he'd do on Ukraine. Just watch. Watch him dodge last night with Trey Gowdy in Fox's now failing 8 p.m. hour.
You wore the uniform. If you are elected president, you may be the first one in a while to have worn the uniform. How would you address the ongoing war in Eastern Europe between Russia and Ukraine on day one of a Ron DeSantis presidency?
Well, first, I think what we need to do as a veteran is recognize that our military has become politicized. You talk about gender ideology, you talk about things like global warming that they're somehow concerned, and that's not the military that I served in. We need to return our military to focusing on commitment, focusing on the core values and the core mission. That would be something that I...
Hey guys, he gets asked about Ukraine and he starts talking about gender ideology. I mean, listen, it's an important issue, okay? I get it. It's easy to dunk on gender ideology in the military. That's an easy one for social media. Answering the question without upsetting your donors, without upsetting, Mitch McConnell and those guys who would love to have yet another never-ending war, this time with a nuclear-capable power, not dudes that live in caves. It's a problem. If the same question were asked of my father, as it was, in a CNN, so not exactly a friendly hometown crowd town hall, about a week ago, he'd answer, I'd get to work to secure a peace deal, to stop the unnecessary deaths. And Ron tried doing that, but his donors didn't like it. Remember that a couple weeks ago when he took the Trump light approach and sort of almost tried saying what Donald Trump's been saying, and then, the donors, the establishment, the people who are really creating this image, they didn't like that one little bit, and so they cut it off. And that peace deal is necessary, folks. We're running full speed into nuclear war. Just today, Russia announced that it's deploying tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. This is the first time tactical nuclear weapons will be stored outside of Russia since the end of the Cold War. Hey guys, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, we've been fighting not just a proxy war, but a boots-on-the-ground war against the world's largest nuclear power by volume of nuclear warheads. You know, a despot, a dictator like Putin? Sure, guys, keep pushing him so you can get your jobs at Raytheon and the board seats that are required, but the problem with those things, you gotta sell more missiles. This movement of nukes to Belarus, which borders Ukraine, comes a day after a report revealed that Ukraine was behind a drone attack on the Kremlin in May. U.S. taxpayer money is the only reason the Ukrainian government exists. Our dollars, your hard-earned dollars, umpteen billion dollars, are going to perpetuate the violence and the death. And as long as we're sending billions in this proxy war and having a de facto war with Russia, it's never going to end, okay? At this point, we're probably paying their salaries. We give them equipment. We're backstopping their pensions. We can't take care of our problems at home. God forbid we help Americans, our own veterans suffering. We want to turn Ukraine effectively into either an American colony or a globalist colony, either way, okay? It's just big ag land. That's how they're going to feed the world when the globalists take over, by controlling that. So when they're directly attacking Russia, we're party to that attack, folks. Russia keeps threatening to use nukes. So why exactly are we not putting an end to all of this? Seems odd, right? Think of all the crazy steps taken to try to reduce COVID deaths, right? Remember, they put sand in your skateboard parks, for God's sakes. But we move full speed towards nuclear war, which would end life as we know it. Just so we're clear, Russia has approximately 6,000 and change nuclear weapons. Doesn't take a lot of those to, let's just say, create a serious climate change problem. Not the one that they're pretending is going to end the world in 12 years. That will end it in about 12 milliseconds, okay? DeSantis is a phony. Republicans are becoming more and more aware of that every day. And by the way, most of these conservatives that are lined up behind Ron right now, well, guess what, folks? Look them up. They're all never Trumpers. They were all never Trumpers in 16. Sure, some of them put the MAGA hat on for a couple of seconds to get the obligatory photo or whatever, to raise a couple bucks from a base and take advantage of them. They weren't MAGA then, and they aren't MAGA now. And this definitely isn't the time to roll the dice on a rhino. There's too much at stake for the future of our country. But the Democrats right now are loving every second of it, because they know that the billionaires backing DeSantis and the money spent there, it's not going to help Ron win. It's going to help Republicans lose. So the Democrats are rejoicing as we spend all the money that we'd be spending to ramp up a ballot harvesting operation to take on the insanity of the left on a war where the establishment wants to take out America first. Nothing more. We'll get more into this later in the show, but first, we have a few more examples in the news of the far left lunacy destroying our country. Say, for example, you might have fond memories of going to baseball games as a kid, or maybe as an adult, bringing your kids. They're supposed to be family-friendly events, great time, good old American fun. But folks, that's not what the Los Angeles Dodgers think. Take a look at the group that they're inviting to an upcoming Pride Night. Check this out for yourself. Why are the Los Angeles Dodgers fine with a group that mocks, desecrates Jesus and Christianity? And speaking of anti-Christian hate, where's the manifesto from the Nashville trans shooter? We found out recently that the shooter went from the school to the attached cathedral and fired 7 bullets into the stained glass figure of Adam, the first man in the Bible. This is clearly an anti-Christian terror attack, and yet we hear nothing about it. That's why the press swept it under the rug. It's not a hate crime if the target's a group the left also hates, okay? Imagine for a second this happened to say, I don't know, they were doing this about Muslims or any other religion. But sadly, folks, it's par for the course. It's not just baseball games. It's our own government. You can attack Christians. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Ooh, take them all out. You can desecrate Jesus at a professional sports game, and they don't care. And get this, the Media Research Center just found out that the Biden administration gave a grant to the University of Dayton to the tune of about $40 million of your taxpayer dollars to conduct a project that targeted groups such as the Christian Broadcast Network, Turning Point USA, and even Breitbart News. The reverse of that is unthinkable. Imagine they used that kind of money to go after like the clowns in Congress, like Adam Schiff, who spent months, if not years, lying to the American people, or all of the leftist media who tried cramming their garbage and their lies down our throats. There's no accountability for that. According to the Media Research Center, under the Trump administration, the Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Grant program was used to prevent terrorism. But it was revamped under the Biden administration and renamed to provide funding to, quote, combat all forms of terrorism and targeted violence. I don't know, guys. I've spoken at a lot of Turning Point events. I've read a lot of Breitbart articles. I've never seen targeted violence, other than perhaps from the leftists trying to protest it. But of course, instead of focusing on preventing actual violence and terrorism, the program is now being used to target conservatives. And it's costing you, again, around $40 million. And sadly, this is part of the same theme that we see from major corporations, who seem to be totally on board with the same sort of insanity. It never ends, folks, because have you been following what's going on now at Target, right? They unveiled their Pride Month merchandise, which apparently included a tuck-friendly bathing suit and using a brand that has a history of satanic-themed products. Think about this for a second, folks. This isn't even a joke. This is Target, one of the country's largest, if not the world's largest retailers, pushing satanic-themed projects. This designer says things like, Satan respects pronouns and Satan loves you. Well, you know what? I bet they do, because it leads to the destruction of everything that is good and decent, the destruction of the nuclear family, and everything else the radical left wants to attack. What's the purpose of this? What does this have to do with Pride Month? Absolutely nothing. But the degeneracy never ends. Now, we do have some good news in that the backlash has been so strong that Target reportedly lost $9 billion in 1 week and called an emergency meeting over the LGBTQIA can't remember all the acronyms. I don't think anyone even actually knows what they are. Merchandise. And in some stores, they're reallocating or relocating or outright moving and removing the merchandise. And I actually received a letter from a friend. I'm trying to keep it specifically as vague as possible because there'll be reprisals if you have people that are friends that work in these companies, right? If you're a leftist, you can do and say whatever you want. If you disagree with some of those things, you're out. So this is from inside of Target corporate. The letter reads, and I quote, "Hey Don, hope you're well. I'm not sure if I'll catch you before you go travel. I'm taking a week with my son. I figured I'd pass on a little behind the scenes from Target. I sent it to some other friends of yours as well. My spouse works on the corporate side of Target. He or she has several times noted how extremely woke the corporate structure is. So much so that while they have a zero tolerance policy for bullying and safety, such that if her opinion makes anyone feel unsafe, she will be terminated immediately. If she doesn't outwardly toe the work line, she will be fired. Remember, tolerance is king." He continues, "With the recent Pride line and satanic-themed clothing lines being pulled after Bud Light Backlash and others on the retail merchandise, people in corporate are crying foul and forming peer support groups because these leftist co-workers are so distraught that the corporate masters are bending to the dollar rather than continuing to push their satanic trans-themed garbage. They're having breakdowns in Zoom meetings. There have even been, quote, emotional support groups formed for people to help cope with the groomer line clothing being removed. We need to keep the pressure on. Don't let their executive leadership walk it off and whitewash the whole thing. It's affecting them. She's already looking for alternate employment." So you see, folks, the strategy is working, and we need to keep up the pressure. Don't let the Satanists win. I promise you, nothing good will come from that. Don't let these woke corporations get away with any more of this nonsense. And it's why I talk so much about Public Square, which I'm super psyched about. We had Michael Seifert, the CEO, on here a couple of weeks ago talking about that. Go check out publicsquare.com. It's publicsq.com. Go check them out. They are a company in the parallel economy. They're a place where you can find people who share your values, support their businesses. Go shop there and shop with people who share your values. Okay, I invested in it myself because I believe so much in this mission to find freedom-loving businesses who support your values, just like the sponsors of this show. Okay, go to publicsq.com. They got to like number 3 in the App Store on merchandise because people like you are looking at it. We're making moves. We're moving the needle. You don't have to choose between what you believe and what you buy. You can actually vote with your dollars. All of us, America First patriots, are actually starting to win some of these battles. And we'll talk about winning battles a little bit more with Senator Tuberville in just a few seconds. But before we go there, I want to make sure to thank some of our sponsors. Go check out the great folks at Goldco by going to donjuniorgold.com because, guys, honestly, we see what's going on. We see the economic storm brewing. We see all the warning signs, and I just want you to be prepared. Gold and silver can protect your retirement savings from inflation and dollar devaluation. Owning tangible, physical gold can make a difference when you watch the decisions that are being made. Remember, inflation, insane rise in interest rates, banks are collapsing. Goldco has helped thousands of Americans diversify their portfolio and protect their retirement savings. So, like Public Square, check out and support the companies who support you, the companies who advertise on programming like this, instead of the woke companies who hate your guts. Go to donjuniorgold.com to learn more. That's donjrgold.com and learn more. I also want to tell you about one of our newer sponsors, Secure Private Data. We all know our privacy is under attack, folks. We certainly can't trust big tech or our government, certainly as evidenced by everything we've seen in the last few weeks. Secure, spelled S-E-K-U-R, is a private application offering secure private email, VPN, and instant messaging. Secure's technology allows you to communicate, go online privately without the fear of spying from big tech, your internet service provider, your email provider, or hackers. And Secure has its own encryption, meaning your emails, chat, and web surfing are encrypted at the highest levels and protected by Swiss data privacy laws, some of the strictest in the world. And Secure actually supports your values and isn't caving to the woke mob that runs all of big tech. So go to donjunior.secure.com, that's DONJRSEKUR, where you can get 15% discount on any of their solutions for the next 5 years. And with that, I want to bring in legendary coach and United States Senator Tommy Tuberville. Come on in here, Tommy.
How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. We have to do this a little informally. You had some rough weather getting in, and they're saying, Tommy's getting off the plane. I'm saying, hey, I know where the airport is, and that's a little bit long, but it's been a rough couple of days.
Yeah, well, traveling, raising money, that's what you do now as a politician. And that's something different for me. But yeah, flying a lot. I lived in South Florida. I lived in Miami for 10 years, so I knew coming down there, afternoon weather is always unpredictable.
Yeah, especially this time of year. I feel like, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. It usually changes, although there's been like 3 days of just nonstop storms. It's a little bit nuts.
Oh, well, that's South Florida, but there's a lot of pluses that go along with the minuses. I love living down there, and obviously you do. It's a great place, good people, and conservatives, Republicans, a lot of Republicans, and thank goodness we have a state like this that still exists. We don't have many left.
No, well, Alabama's certainly one of them.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit. I mean, you're running a senator. Yeah, listen, part of the game obviously is fundraising, because even in Alabama, I guess a race you won by close to 30 points.
Yeah, 25 points.
25 points. I mean, about as big a blowout as you get in sort of, I'm going to call it national politics, because even if it's a state senator seat, there's only 100 of those seats, and the Democrats spend big there. So even there, they raised a lot of money to fight against you, to try to damage you, to try to pull someone else over the line. So you even have to deal with that in Alabama.
Oh yeah, I beat a sitting congressman. I beat a former United States Attorney General and Senator, Jeff Sessions. And then I had to beat a sitting senator who was Doug Jones, who somehow won in Alabama. And he spent $10 million a month for 3 months, and I was about broke because I'd had to go through all those primaries. And we end up winning pretty handily. But the people of Alabama, we're still conservative, still believe in God. We still believe in guns. We still believe in the Constitution, and that's what it's all about. We've got several states, Georgia, you would think, and Georgia's still conservative. I don't know what's going on over there, but it's a very conservative state, and then you have Tennessee, then you have Mississippi, but we're all about the same, and we just got to get the right people to run, pull the trigger, and get it done the next time around.
Yeah, I mean, so you had that. You had a rough primary, and it makes the general a lot harder. I mean, it actually sounds sort of similar to what we're talking about right now, right? Where you have a sort of a Ron DeSantis coming in, pretty significant deficit, but there's a lot of billionaire money that seems to control a little bit more there, right? I mean, you saw the flip-flop on Ukraine and all this stuff. What, do you think that this sort of situation is sort of, I mean, are the Democrats just rejoicing that there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars made by consultants and this to keep a race going like this, that we, I look at it as money we don't have for a general. We got to create a ballot harvesting operation, right? If America was Alabama, I wouldn't worry about it. But in races where they're outspending us 10-1 already in some places across the country, I think as a strategist, and you certainly did that as a football coach, it seems like depleting our resources that way is sort of the Democrats' wet dream.
Yeah, I'm new to this business, and I've been watching it now for 3 or 4 years in House races, Senate races, and now presidential race coming up. The Democrats raise money very easily. That wind blew. It is unbelievable how much money they have. They have 3 or 4 times the money we do as Republicans, but still money doesn't win for you. You still have to have people. You still have to have the right ethics, the right morals, and most people that are still Americans that believe in the Constitution, they're going to vote the right way. And so I like what President Trump's done. He's more of a hands-on guy, retail politics. You go out and talk to people, go to rallies. He went on CNN the other day.
Yeah, that's his polling, by the way. He hears it from the people directly.
And I've told him
he's
that.
not listening to the billionaire class, which is probably why
I've told
they
him,
want
hey,
to support others.
Hey, the more people you shake hands with, that's a vote for every time you touch somebody. Yeah. It's hard that, as a senator, that's fairly easy because it's statewide. I can't imagine it being a presidential race, but this is going to be interesting. I hope we have more people get into the race as president. I told President Trump that. More the better. We need a deep bench. There's not anybody out there that can really beat him. He'll beat himself if he loses, because he'll beat himself by not getting out and doing what he normally does, but he's going to do that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's going to get out in politics.
Yeah. No one's ever accused him of being low energy.
No, he loves doing it, and it's everybody asks, well, but what about Ron DeSantis? I said, well, we got to find out first of all who he is, and we got to find out, is the establishment funding him? Because if they are, and people find that out, it's done. It's over with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we know some of that already. When you
yeah.
get sort of the Karl Rove, Paul Ryan endorsement, you start saying, probably not MAGA. Let's see what happens, but probably not MAGA. I mean, there's a revolt amongst those guys. They want that power back, and that's what for me, I'm an outsider as well, right? I built buildings for a living before we got into the sort of, the craziness of all of this, and that's what's sort of surprising. You saw, 2 weeks ago, with the firing of Tucker Carlson, some of your colleagues in the Senate saying, and Republican colleagues, with Tucker gone, at least now we can fully support the war in Ukraine without backlash, but your constituency doesn't want it. And yet you're off the record, you'll tell, a liberal journalist that you're thrilled that Tucker Carlson's gone because you can literally go against the will of the people who put you in those positions. And I was like, isn't that like everything Americans hate about politics?
Well, deep down, at the end of the day, Don, people want truth in this country. They're tired of being lied to.
Oh.
They are tired of being lied to. I've never seen the deceit in the 2 years I've been in the Senate.
Well, how about in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Between the Durham report,
But we knew that was wrong anyway. We knew for 2 years.
We did, but the media, the powers that control this, big tech, mainstream media, big social, they still pretended like it was real. I mean, there's still people, out there on TV being like Russia collusion was real. It clearly wasn't. But listen, you got into this because you believe in it. Mm-hmm. I started, instead of just shutting up and being a real estate guy, I got in it because I actually believe in it. I'm fighting for it. But there's people that, again, and I don't even fault them. They're living their American dream, or trying to, in the Joe Biden economy. They're struggling every day. They're consuming 5 minutes of news. If they're hearing that kind of disinformation or that nonsense, it's like, maybe there's got to be something to it. I mean, would I have, when I was a target of these guys, in Russia, right? I did 50 hours of testimony for treason, a crime punishable by death, minor details. I was like, well, there's got to be something to it. Someone must have maybe infiltrated my email, or maybe I took a selfie with someone and that's how I got sucked into it. Even I, as a target, couldn't have imagined that the FBI was just lying, that they were in cahoots with the other side. Even if I was thinking about it politically, and yet now we know that actually happened, and that's pretty scary.
It is really scary. All of our institutions are compromised. All you have to do is look at it and listen just a little bit. You don't have to know a whole lot.
Yeah.
I mean, just the average citizen out there can figure it out on their own if they just keep watching what's going on and then read the reports. And this Durham report, most of us knew what it was about and knew the end game. But when you have let me say this, and I've got friends in the FBI, and I've talked to a lot of them, and they said, listen, what happened with the FBI was back when Obama became president, he took the upper echelon of the FBI and inserted bureaucrats. He took out former FBI agents and put bureaucrats in. And they said, until we get FBI agents back in running the FBI, this is not going to happen. We're not going to have the same FBI we had years and years ago. CIA the same way. They've run their education system. Just look at anything that has to do with bureaucrats. We got problems. Now they're trying to get in the military. And man, have they got a foot in the door on that. And it just scares me.
Yeah.
It scares me that they're going to do what they've done to the other institutions and do to our military. Because if they get that, the only thing left is the Supreme Court. That's the only thing.
Well, and they're talking about that every day, right? They're talking, hey, let's just flood the courts. We'll add 100 judges and we'll appoint them all. And I mean, there's nothing off the table, right? They have disastrous recruitment in the military right now because no one wants to go serve a military where they're pushing being pushed by, trans or like drag influencers. Like, it's just not the people who would go fight and die for a country, probably not into that. Like, it doesn't take a marketing genius or a military, it doesn't exactly take George Patton to figure that out, and yet it doesn't stop them from doing it.
No, and they do it every day. I'm on the Armed Services Committee, and there's not a hearing that doesn't go by that some of us don't ask a general or admiral. Now, you have these books in your library on some of our aircraft carriers, or you're doing poems on aircraft carriers, or you're building more transgender restrooms than you are for coverings for $100 million airplanes. What in the world is going on here? And it's a total transition of our country where we're being turned inside out. And you and I both know, we've grown up in the best country on the face, and we'll never be one that's as good as what we've got.
Listen, as pissed off as I am about what's going on right now, there's nowhere else I think is better.
No.
Like, we're the leader of freedom. We're the leader of all those things, although all the things we believe in, they're on the table.
Right.
To the Democrats, they're all negotiable for their agenda. And that, again, that's sort of has to wake everyone up.
Well, this group wants us to be like Europe in a lot of ways, socialist, a dictator as a president, like some of the presidents that are in Europe. I was on a plane the other day traveling. I forget where I was at. I travel so much, but this lady was sitting next to me. I said, "Where are you from?" She said, "I'm from Canada." And we started talking, and she says, "What are y'all trying to do with your country?" And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" She says, "We have a dictator in Canada. We have no freedoms left. We used to be a great place to live. It is awful as I speak. And y'all are doing the same thing to your country that we did to ours. You need to stop it." She didn't know I was a senator, so I didn't speak up at that point. But I told her, I said, "Yes, ma'am, I do believe and understand what you're saying." And she's exactly right. That they are turning, the Democrats and the progressives are just turning us inside out into something that, number one, we don't want to be. Number two, it won't last long. But once they get at that point, will we ever get it back?
Well, I think the answer is no. I mean, again, they've controlled these institutions so well. I think it's been going on for much longer than we probably realized. Probably decades. It just took like a Donald Trump or a little bit of a revolt of the actual people fighting back against the sort of uniparty establishment to actually bring out the true. They're saying the quiet parts out loud now. They were just doing them before, and I think that was really important. It's sort of like when with the school lockdowns, right? Randy Weingarten and the teachers union, "No, we don't want it." It was actually the greatest thing to happen. Our kids, it was a disaster for them. It was a disaster for their reading, for their science, for their math scores, for everything. But parents finally figured out what was going on because they're walking by and their kids are learning about everything other than math, anything other than things that are actually important to an education. And so it was like the greatest sort of self-own of all time. They exposed themselves. So much of what you're talking about with Canada, I agree. I mean, I would have thought, Canada, the UK, Australia, maybe New Zealand, us. We're like the glass bastions of freedom in the world. And it's like, you look at those places and it's like, oh my God, like we're so much further fallen than we could ever believe. We got to continue to fight for that.
And you brought up the key. One of the reasons I ran for this job, because I did it for 40 years after I got out of coaching, and I worked for ESPN for a little bit, and sat around the house one day, and my wife walks by and she said, "You hadn't been here for a long time, 40 years. This has been my house. Find you a job." So
we're going to send you to the swamp. Just get out. It's
so I ran for this job, but I ran because I saw for the last 15 years of where education was going. Because I went into high schools in every state. Yeah. I talked to counselors, principals, teachers. I saw the transcripts and what these kids were taking, and I'd ask, "What is this?" And
how are you going to pay back your college loan with that degree?
Yeah, and they don't teach reading and math. In China right now, in 6th, 7th grade, they're learning calculus and algebra 2 and all these things. And we're teaching social justice, diversity. We don't teach math. We don't teach kids to learn. 28 schools in Baltimore a few months ago. Last year's graduating class, 28 schools in Baltimore, 0 proficiency in math in any graduate.
0, guys, right? I mean, not a single graduate had proficiency in reading or math.
This country was built on the backs of educated young men and women that got an education and went out and got a job and helped this country become better. And you can't make this country better. It's like being an offensive lineman in football. Unless you know the fundamentals and techniques, I don't care how good an athlete you are, if you don't have the fundamentals and techniques, you can't play the position. You can't play the position in life if you can't read and write and do math. You can't do it. You're going to have to live off the government. Well, I'll be dang.
Hey, the Democrats have a solution for you, sir.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
We'll take
right.
care of you forever. You can just be an idiot
Exactly.
and do nothing. So hey, that's an interesting one. It's an angle I actually never thought. But yeah, I mean, you've been immersed in education
forever.
It was coaching, but like it's the same thing. And you see the students. Talk about when you got into it versus more recently. Do you see those changes manifest themselves throughout?
Oh, big time. You could bring them in, and what I would do. As a football coach, you sign 25 new players a year, and you bring them in, and before you put them in a tough college class, whether it's English or math or whatever, I found out the hard way, make sure that they're proficient in that before you put them in that class. Because if they flunk a couple of classes, it's going to be hard to catch up. You're going to lose your eligibility. So I'd bring them in, and Don, but the last 10 or 15 years, you would have very few young men and women who had 3.5, even some 4-point GPAs that were not proficient in reading. They couldn't read 12th grade. They were 6th grade, 9th grade reading level. It's amazing. And some of them couldn't read at all, but they got a degree in high school. They just passed them on. I spent some of my own money trying to put them in reading classes, trying to get them to a point. And then we budgeted money for tutors, and we get them to a level at a certain point, whether it's math or English, science, and then we could put them in a college preparatory class, but it's gotten a lot worse. And again, it goes back to one thing. If you can't read and if you can't write, you can't live in a country like this and not have somebody help you, make it through life, in which that's a lot of what this government wants. Teachers' unions have absolutely killed our schools. Killed it. And if we don't get school choice, I heard a North Carolina governor today, they passed a law for school choice in North Carolina. Well, he comes out today, he's a Democrat, and says it will just destroy our public schools if we do this.
They're already destroyed. I saw the stats the other day. It was like, only like 25% proficiency in so if you're getting a 25, that's a failing grade.
Yeah.
75%, it's lunacy.
Yeah.
And yet we keep doing it because they control so much power. That notion of school choice or dollars following the student, I can't imagine anyone who actually understands the facts not being for that. And yet, that's the difference between the constituency and the powers that be that have that control, right? I imagine if you explained it and you took, even in the inner cities, and you explained to them what they could have for their children, who wouldn't want that? But that's not what they're getting, and they don't even know that that's an option. And when it is an option, they spend more money fighting the onslaught from the teachers union than they do actually being able to form the charter schools or whatever it may be.
Well, the COVID really brought it out about how bad our schools are and how bad our teachers are in the inner city. Most of them in the inner city, I don't know how they got degrees, to be honest with you. I don't know whether they can read and write.
But they're the experts that want to make sure that parents have no say. How do you decide what to do with your children?
They want to raise. They want less time to work, less time in school. It's just we've ruined work ethic in this country. Yeah. We don't work at it anymore. We push an easy life, and we all want it better for our kids. Yeah. We do. And that's the reason I worked hard all my life. I got one son that works for Goldman Sachs, and the other one working on a hypersonic missile. Both got degrees, but I didn't give them anything. They had to earn it on their own. And I think a lot of people got to understand: make your kids earn what they're getting. Help them to a point, but you can help them too much.
Yeah, listen, and again, I'm very self-aware. I understand I'm the son of a billionaire, but my parents were very much like that. My mom was, she escaped communist Czechoslovakia. So as blessed as we were sort of spoiled differently. Great experiences and stuff like that, but it was never bought off and just here's what it is. They always made us have summer jobs, and my dad was like, hey, if you're going to build a building, you better learn how to dig the foundation. And you're going to do that for 2 summers. And I thought that was so important and made a big difference in my life. Again, fully understanding that I'm blessed. Not everyone has what I was able to be to start off with, but from there you have to do it on your own, and I think that's an important foundation for setting things up.
Exactly. You learn how to work. You learn how to make decisions, and most people don't now. Most of these kids growing up don't know how to make a decision. They're addicted to their cell phone and social media, and
Wait, relax. Don't go crazy.
Well, but you know what I'm saying.
I may be guilty of that myself, but yes, I get it.
They stay on it all the time.
Yeah, no,
you're talking about 14, 16 hours a day. Yeah. You can't live a normal life like that. And we have a huge mental health problem in this country because of that.
Yes.
And it's not just because of that. Of course, the borders are open, and we got drugs everywhere. And of course, we had a mental health problem beforehand, but we've never had an answer to it. Our answer to mental health is, if somebody has a problem, you put them in jail, and then after you can't keep them in there for a while, you kick them back out on the street and let them wander around.
Or you just put them on whatever drugs Big Pharma's pushing that week, and let's just solve the problem because there's a pill for everything, right?
Exactly, and we've got to get control of mental health. We don't. I don't think we can make it as a country because the status quo, for a while, we were making progress, and then all of a sudden, a lot of things come in to effect, and our kids are growing up as zombies in some areas. I mean, they're bullying. It used to be, you'd get bullied maybe at school or whatever. Now, they get bullied online. I mean, it's a tough situation. But again, there's no answer for it. And where I work in Washington D.C., nobody wants to talk about it. They want to talk about the visual things that they can get on TV about and talk about.
Yeah, no, exactly. Everything can be done in 140 characters or less. It's a headline, not a substance, and it's pervasive. So listen, you're passionate about all. What was there a thing that sparked you saying, "Hey, I'm going to get into this wonderful world of politics"? Listen, in Alabama, at least at Auburn, you walk on water. I think there's probably some Alabama fans that may disagree with that, given your record against Nick Saban. But what was there something that was like, boom, like I'm getting into this?
Yeah, one of the things that kind of pushed me over the edge of getting into politics was your dad. When he ran, being a non-politician, and I was coaching at the University of Cincinnati when he won. That was my last year, 2016. And he won, and I saw the things that he was trying to do, actually pushing things that we needed pushing, but also fighting back against the establishment. I said, I might want to do this. And he helped, obviously, but, and I didn't serve in the military. My dad died on active duty in the military, age 53. My brother was in the military, and so I barely missed Vietnam, and said, I'm going to do this. This is going to be my service. And you can make a lot more money coaching, to be honest with you. A lot more money. And
listen, like all things, like I literally, it's like a key of the show. It's like, hey, it was a lot easier and a lot more lucrative to be a real estate developer, but I also have 5 young kids, and I got to leave them a country that we recognize.
Exactly.
And that again, that's on the table for these guys right now.
Yeah. But I can't say that, and I tell people back in Alabama, they say, you like what you're doing? Not really. I don't like this, but I'm glad I'm there. Because I think I bring a little common sense and something from a different part of what most of them are lawyers that I work with. You have a few business people, most are lawyers, and I've learned a lot. It's worse now that I got in. That I was watching and looking from the outside.
You can't imagine how bad it is until you're the guy actually taking those slings and arrows. That's why I'm like, when everyone's like, well, Trump should have done this, should have done that. Like relax. Like you don't understand like what you're up against. It's not, you're not the Lord.
Exactly.
When you're in one of these positions, whether it's president or senator, there's all sorts of people that can subvert you along the way, and we figured that out. Now we actually know who those people are. I think that's why they hate Trump this time around even more, because that's the true threat to those little fiefdoms that they've been able to create for unelected bureaucrats, essentially.
Well, since I've been there, I've looked at it, and the Democrats, they stay more on attack and resentment politics, meaning that they want every individual group to fight each other. It's like taking a hornet's nest and just shaking it up. Everybody's always fighting each other. There's nothing easy about it, and nothing's getting done. What'd your dad do? He didn't really get into policy that much. What he did, he went after the establishment and politicians that weren't doing their job, and he called them out. And my gosh, you talking about stirring up a nest. Yeah, you know as well as I do. And so that was a difference, and that's what he has done and did as president. like nobody else done. He called everybody out. He called the media out, fake news and all that. He's exactly right. The things I see in Washington, D.C. is absolutely amazing. It's full of, bureaucrats. It's full of people that live off the federal government. And
well, listen, it's a cutthroat business, but so is sports certainly at your level. Talk about that. Talk about the similarities. What are the similarities, and perhaps what are the differences?
Well, I mean, you got a common goal, obviously, to win. And in college football, you recruit and you get people on your side, and you try to win on a Saturday. The thing about government, you try to win, but it is slow motion. You don't play every Saturday. There's not a game every Saturday. You might have a game every 3 or 4 months, and you're trying to get enough people on your side to vote your way.
They have a much bigger cheerleading squad with the mainstream media and big tech.
Well, the media is one of our big problems. I mean, if the media was down the line balanced, and they held Republicans to the fire and the Democrats, and they just called it the way they saw it, we would have a country that would be unbelievable. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I don't know what happened over the years, and even before your time, they started moving to one side. And it's not bipartisan. It's all partisan. I come off the Senate floor, and I can see the ones, and they're coming to you asking the questions. Some I'll talk to, some I won't, because I know that they're going to take your words and mix it up and make you look like.
Meanwhile, your colleague John Fetterman, he's a brilliant mind. He's a great orator. It's a little bit of a double standard, right?
I like John. He took my old office the last few weeks. I moved to another office. He took my office, and he come in, and he's obviously had problems. He's had health problems, and I can't imagine. I was healthy, and I struggled doing it. Going through a campaign and going and
trust me, I get it.
Yeah,
it's
and
brutal.
going through all the things you have to go through, and he's really struggled, and we all wish him the best, and I talk to him every day. But he struggles. He understands that. He's had health problems, and he wanted to do it, and he stayed with it, and so he's going to have to make the best of it.
Did he want to do it? I'm curious about that one, because it feels like he was sort of pushed into it, right? The Democrats knew about a lot of the health stuff and the stroke beforehand, and they just assumed maybe he was the guy that they could get to win, and then it's like, he missed a couple months of work, and then it was. And again, I understand private relationships. I don't ever want to broach those, but it doesn't feel to me like he really wants it. It's like, oh crap, he's there. Like, all right, just go vote, rubber stamp the Democrat policy, and go on.
I have a hard time communicating, because you have to communicate with so many people every day.
Yeah.
Then you have to give speeches, and you have to go to hearings and ask questions. And he's on the Ag Committee with me. He's not on any other committees, but you got to be prepared. And of course, when he first got there, he's kind of like me. He didn't realize what you're getting into, and once you get into it,
you're in.
Then he kind of got stressed out, and of course he goes in the hospital for a couple months, and now he's back. But it's you got to be 100%, and we'll watch and see. I hope he gets better.
It's a high level game, and that's the problem. It's a high level game, but there's also real stakes. Not that there's not in football, but these could be. As Russia is moving tactical nuclear weapons into Belarus today. You guys are being issued satellite phones. I don't want to know what they're for, but I can only imagine. That's scary stuff. And if people aren't functioning 100%, if your quarterback's at 90%, it's game changing. That would be, double digits in a point spread change if people knew that, right? The bookies would alter that. But when we're talking about life and death, when we're talking about trillion-dollar decisions, when we're talking about decisions that our children and grandchildren could be beholden to, whether it's financially or otherwise, you got to be on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I get up every morning at 5 o'clock. And I read for a couple hours. I read stuff where I can keep up with. I'm not talking about news. I'm talking about articles about whether it's Ukraine, it's what's come out of Russia, what they're doing in Iran. There's. In football, they had offense, defense, and kicking game. Here, you got everything, and you got to keep up with it. And so that's the reason I'm saying it's hard to be compromised and be 100%. And you got to be on your toes. I'm gonna tell you. And then you got you got the mainstream media out there that's going, they're going to attack you. Yeah. They want to attack you every day. I got holes on all these generals and admirals right now, and they're all over me about this. Hey, pass the law, bring it over.
Yeah,
Let us. The only reason I held it was
Yeah.
because they're dictating from the Pentagon. Don't do that. Hey, they elected us to Congress. Let's vote on it, pass it. You can have your admirals and generals, but do not go overhead. And that's what's happening right now, Don. The White House and the Pentagon, they're doing legislation themselves.
Correct.
And if they're going to do that, we might as well lock the door and go home.
Yeah, they're totally bypassing Congress. I mean, we had a sort of retired colonel on here a week ago talking about exactly that. Like, there's more 4-star generals now, when we're not really at war versus when we had World War II. Like, let's just say slightly different. Even if we've been at war for 20 years, it's a different war. And yet, the results don't really seem to be in line, and doesn't stop the bureaucracy from expanding, or more generals, and no one really retires, and everyone gets the reward to be a general. And if you're trans, you probably become a general or an admiral real quickly too. And it never seems to end. And so I actually love that you're holding them up, because we have to put checks. I mean, our whole system is based on checks and balances, and yet it seems like if you're a Democrat, you can totally bypass all of that. You can get it in. The bureaucrats control everything, and they're de facto running the government while being unelected officials.
Exactly. And you were saying about generals, in World War II, there's one for every 6,000 service members. Now there's one for every 1,500. We've got too many. They've got to figure that out in the Pentagon. Newt Gingrich always talks about taking the Pentagon and just make it 3 sides, and instead of 5. We got way too many people over there.
Yeah.
And hearings and armed services hearings all the time, I asked whether it's Secretary Austin or Milley, I said, listen, we're not spending our money on building weapons. We're either doing it, we know.
They're worried about white rage or something.
Yeah.
I never even heard of it, but apparently it's a big thing.
Yeah.
So
we're supposed to have a killing machine. And you hate to say that, but that's what the military is. They've got to be afraid of us, but they don't want that. They want to make sure that everybody understands they've got total control, and they got people in place that are going to teach the things that they want to teach, and it's really sad. But we've got to have a good military. I'm going to tell you, in my lifetime and yours, today, we have the most dangerous world that any of us have ever lived in.
Of course, listen.
We're
talking about nukes casually these days.
Iran, they've almost got a nuke. Okay, they've almost got it. Once they get it, what are they going to do with it? Then you got Israel sitting around waiting, and they're not going to sit back.
No, of course not.
They're not going to sit back, and then of course you got Ukraine.
Well, and it's not like it's their their entire existence has been threatened by Iran daily. The Ayatollah, he still has his Twitter account when they banned Trump and stuff like that, but he can literally say they're going to wipe them off the face of the earth. It's like, oh, that's different. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's the double standard that we deal with every day.
But we don't need any more wars.
No, I agree.
And of course we're funneling all this. I hadn't voted for one dime for Ukraine.
Nor should you. Listen, the problem
but
with
I'm for Ukraine. Now, because I'm for Ukraine winning, but we can't continue to do it. We can't afford it. People don't understand we can't afford this.
The problem is this. As long as we're funneling money to them, as long as we're giving 130 billion, that's a lot of money. Okay?
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. That's beyond that, the Pentagon lost 220 billion. Minor details, right? I'm sure most of that's going there, or de facto going to our military to send it over there. So you could be at, $500 billion in this proxy war with Russia. But as long as that money's flowing, all the corrupt people are getting rich. There's no incentive to actually stop fighting the war. We're fighting that war for them with our equipment. We're spending our money, and no one's coming to the table as long as there's more weapons, and we'll probably take some money on the side, and everyone's getting rich who's making decisions while people are dying in the streets needlessly.
We hadn't won a war in a long time. I don't know why we'd want to get in another one. Think about it. We didn't. Vietnam, we ran. Okay. Iraq, it wasn't a war. They didn't have an army to really fight, and we just marched through them, and we turned around and gave it back to them for some unknown reason, instead of taking our oil and paid ourselves back in terms of what we put into that. Of course, Afghanistan, our military didn't run, our politicians ran, and that was the worst debacle I've seen. And that was when I first got to the Senate, and our military people, true military people, were embarrassed what the White House did.
Of course they were. They had to be. I know people there. So, again, and hey, we can do the hyperbole about Democrat. Like it was for me, it was one of the maybe only times as an American I was embarrassed. I picked up my son. I tell the story all the time. I picked up my son from school. It was that week. We were doing like a father-son dinner, and he was 9. It's like, hey, Dad, why would we leave them $86 billion worth of equipment? I don't understand. It's like I don't either. I didn't know how to even explain it to him because it's so ridiculous. He thought like I must be withholding something. Dad, why would we take out our military before we took out the civilians? Why did we leave them? He didn't know what a biometric scanner was, right? But when they left them but he goes, why did we leave them the machines that they could figure out who was helping us for 20 years? It seems like they would probably kill those people. I was like, a 9-year-old got it. But our generals wanted to worry about white rage, and like Joe Biden, wanted to take credit by doing so, accelerating it into the fighting season instead of so he could say he did it faster than Trump. And no one was advocating for the endless wars. And I think that the American populace, frankly, until Ukraine became like the new religion of the left, was generally out of this mindset of no one wants to be in endless wars. And I think that's why the generals went so woke, because that was the retirement plan, like the Raytheon board.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh, maybe we'll go to Disney or something like that.
Well, the one thing I will say, and standing up for a few of the generals that I've gotten to know pretty well, after investigating the Afghanistan, the guy that pulled us out was Joe Biden. Yeah. He went against most of the, now I say some were probably for, but he went against some that he should have listened to, that really knew what was going on, that had been there for a while, that was there under President Trump. They said, we don't need to do it. But he said, we're leaving, we're out. And it wasn't a very good plan. You just, when you do it on a whim.
Yeah, well, he knew because he was just going to get covered in the headlines, and they were going to say, oh, he did it faster, he's better than Trump. Again, Trump wanted to get out too, but there's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it, and Joe Biden demonstrated the way not to do it.
Exactly.
Well, let's change. I want to ask a little bit about, you think about some of the great rivalries in sports, you know what I mean? Talk about, Alabama versus Auburn in that, because I mean, I think of that as sort of like a, Army-Navy, Texas OU, Yankees, Red Sox. For those who, again, some of these rivalries tend to be more regional, and everyone's rivalries are the biggest. But talk a little bit about the Alabama-Auburn rivalry.
Well, fortunately, I was coaching in a lot of big rival games. Mm-hmm. My first one was Catholics versus convicts when I was at University of Miami and coaching with Jimmy Johnson. We went to South Bend, and they called it the Catholics versus. And what a game that was. And then I was involved in the Texas A&M game. I was at A&M as an assistant. Mm-hmm. Then I was in the Egg Bowl with Mississippi State and Ole Miss. That's big for that state.
That's a big one.
But let me tell you something. The Auburn-Alabama game, it's life or death. I mean, they don't talk. Hey, they will talk about football, college, that game before they'll talk about hunting and fishing, and you know how important that is in that state.
That's a big deal in Alabama, yeah.
And you can't ride the fence in that state. You're either one or the other, and if you don't pick a side, then you'll be ridiculed. But it was a fun game. It was hard for a coach. When I coached it, it was hard because I wanted to get it over with, because you felt the weight of every alumni person or football player that ever played at Auburn, for that game. And you wanted to win it for them, not for you, not for your football team. And so that's what made it so tough. And in the same way, now Nick, I'm going to tell you, he's turned the impossible what he's done. He's won, not just winning the Iron Bowl, but also winning national championships. It's just unbelievable what he's done. But there's great football players, great in the South and Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana, Tennessee, Florida. There's a lot of great athletes. And if you just look at the NFL rosters, most of them come from those 5 or 6 states.
So okay, talk about Saban. I mean, is he the greatest of all time? You actually have a winning record against him, which I think not a lot of people can boast, and certainly not a lot of people in what would be a big rivalry.
No, but he's a good friend. We play a lot of golf together. I don't know how and why he's still doing it. He's made a lot of money. He's in the Mercedes business, a John Deere dealership business, but he doesn't hunt and fish. He plays golf. He goes out on a boat. He just went on a 3 or 4 week trip with his wife to Italy and France. I know he was miserable, but because he's the type of worrying about what's going on back home. So, but he's really good, and to accomplish what he's done is just absolutely amazing.
So politics in Alabama, right? Obviously, Auburn's loved, but like half the state also hates that. Was that a consideration? I mean, getting into the game, because again, you can be loved, but you're also the guy that competed against, teams that. Yeah, again, I saw it. I've spent more time in sort of Texas. I've been to Texas OU a bunch of times. I mean, I watch grown men just crying.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Literally just crying, and and I came from New England, went to an Ivy League school. It wasn't the same, so I didn't understand football culture until I sort of got out and started hanging out with guys in the South, and where it is, to your point, practically life and death to these guys. I mean,
oh yeah.
My buddy from Texas, big Republican involved in the game, and he goes, Texas OU weekend for him was the culmination of Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, his birthday, and every other major holiday rolled up into one special weekend. And I'm like,
oh yeah.
What are you talking about? But it was. And so, how was that as you got into politics? That was there an issue that you were the rival coach of someone's beloved team?
When I sat down to run for this job, being at Auburn, still living in Auburn, my wife and I sat down and talked about it. She says, how are you going to get the Alabama people to vote for you? Because it's basically 60-40, okay?
Yeah.
And so you're going to have over 50% of the vote. I said, yeah. So I had me a little strategy when for 2 years I campaigned. I went to every small town, went to Cracker Barrels, every Waffle House, talking to Alabama, Auburn people, and basically told them, why would I vote for you, Coach? I'm an Alabama fan. You beat us 6 in a row, and you stick a thumb in her face and all that. And I said, well, listen, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have Nick. I ran the rest of them off. I got them fired. And it kind of resonated. Everybody kind of laughed about it, But it's true. I went through 5 coaches in 10 years when I was at Auburn. Think about that. Now, Nick's been there to have 13. I went through 5 in 10 years, and he was the 5th one. So
they lose to you twice and it's over.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. They can have a winning record otherwise, but if they lose to Auburn, it's a problem at Alabama.
Doesn't matter, but it's what keeps life going in the state of Alabama is that game, and of course football. Yeah. Now it's basketball is big, baseball's big, all sports are big, and if we don't allow this transgender movement to ruin women's sports are getting bigger. But
talk about that. I mean, because listen, I went to Penn, where the home of Leah Thomas, which probably it's been going on for a little while before, but that was the first big one, right? You can literally have an exact tie with a woman. It's like, well, we're giving it to the dude. Sorry, my producers are laughing, but like it's true. Like they had an exact tie with Riley Gaines. It's like, well, we're giving it to that one because there's press around it, and I'm like, well, why would the tie go to the biological male who became a woman, at least in his own mind, a few weeks ago, rather than the woman? I mean, talk about what that is, because I sit there. I have a daughter that's a great athlete. She's a great golfer, and I know the time it takes, the dedication, the perseverance, to be the best, and yet against men her age, it's just different. There's a biological advantage. There's physical advantages. There's strength. I mean, that they can erase all of that in academia. What I want to know, where are the soccer moms?
Well, they're the ones going to have to change it. And this is one topic that has really made me mad over the last two or 3 months of we're letting this happen because it's a small part of our country that's transgender. Hey, listen, I don't care this country lets you be whatever you want. Be who you want. But for you to be able to compete, say I want to compete against girls or women in a sport where you are definitely 30, 40, 50% bigger, faster, and stronger.
Yeah.
Your daughter, 15, playing golf, if she plays against Bubba Watson's son in a few years, she's not going to beat him because he's going to hit it 325 yards and she's going to hit it 280. And
she's hitting 280 now.
Yeah,
she's like LPGA Tour length average basically already, and she's exceptional for what it is, and who knows what happens with it. But
it's unfair.
Eventually, you catch up.
It's unfair. I mean, you can't do it.
Listen, at Auburn, I'm sure you dealt with the entire athletic department. Is there a woman that could have, from any one of the other sports, that could have gone and sat on the offensive line while you were coaching there and overperformed, or even hung in there?
No, it's not going to happen.
It's just a 350-pound
guy. You're not comparing apples to apples.
No, of course you're not.
I tell people this. It's unfair, but it's also unsafe. I mean, when you're competing against bigger, better athletes, We saw a volleyball game, where the kid gets hit in the face with a volleyball.
Well, there's the MMA, the trans MMA guy that knocked out all these women and fractured their skull. There's, the weightlifting. I guess no one's getting hurt on the other side, but it's insane.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, you look at the records of the men, the top men and the top women, and let's just say there's a large discrepancy, and yet it continues. And again, the moms are what surprises me the most, because I know how much effort they put in, oftentimes, and the dads. But it really feels like it, because it really only affects women, right? There's no women getting into men's sports that are dominating and costing young men their scholarships or whatever it may be. It's only going the one way, which probably tells you everything you need to know, and yet it doesn't seem to matter. But the fact that there's so much silence, why are they afraid to take on that issue?
They're afraid to be called out. I've had a lot of them tell me, well, I'm not going to let my daughters play sports. I said, that's exactly opposite of what you don't want to do. You want to fight for this.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know how to fight for what's right because they're afraid to be called out, be called names, ridiculed because, oh, you're against this certain group. No, that's not what this country is about. It's about being fair, and there's no fairness. One of the few things that Washington, D.C. has done right in the last 50 years is made a law called Title IX, where women had a
you had to deal with that, I'm sure, a lot, because, I mean, the football programs at these universities, I mean, that's, in all fairness, that's the athletic budget, and yet it had to be distributed sort of equally amongst the sexes.
You
even
pay
though
for
you're
every
the only
sport.
one sort of, you're the only one really generating what we call serious revenue.
Basketball doesn't make any, baseball doesn't make, football pays for every athletic sport. Yeah. And now that transgender is coming along, and fine, let them have their own group to compete. But don't let them compete against women, because what's going to happen is these young girls coming up aren't going to play, and it's going to be devastating to women's sports.
Yeah, well, hopefully we push back on that. But I think also, how did sports actually get so politicized? Right, you see that in the NBA and the NFL, and my intro talking about the Dodgers are hosting sort of this blasphemous group with the crucifix made of dildos. How did that happen? How were they able to get a hold of that? Because it doesn't feel like, certainly not in Alabama, but it doesn't feel like the fan base is even accepting of some of this stuff, or at least would be 50-50, and yet it doesn't matter. They're happy to throw that in the face of all of it and just go full woke.
Well, it's all about money. It's all about whether you're commissioner of a league, or you're an athletic director, or you run ESPN.
Yeah, well, you worked with ESPN.
Yeah.
I mean, they feel they're more political to me than CNN.
Sure they are. Well, they're owned by Disney and ABC, and they're very political. And I worked with a group for 2 years. I worked with about 45 people. We traveled everywhere together, and I was one of the announcers of the games, and I was on the short end of the stick when it came to being conservative. It is what it is, because most of them come from the Northeast, people up there. But no, it's a lot of politics in sports. And, the Kaepernick deal of taking a knee on the national anthem really got it stirred up. And I think people saw that if you start something like that, you can accelerate politics. And get people talking about it.
For some of them, you could also sort of accelerate the career, right? They become the martyr. Sure. There's, Kaepernick made, money deals with athletic companies. As he was, let's call it, he's a great athlete, I'm sure, but he was a journeyman quarterback certainly for the NFL, right? I mean, he wasn't outstanding by any metric, and yet he became one of the most talked about NFL players. And probably, I don't know if he sold a lot of jerseys or sold no jerseys, but he certainly got the financial deals that no one else with his stats would have ever gotten. And so, did it push that? Did you see that in your players too? I mean, was there sort of that revolt against the flag, against the anthem, or did that not really exist? Did that really come once they got into the pay world?
No, you didn't see that, because like you said, it's about money. Usually politics is about money, and so you didn't really have that problem in college. But now you're getting into NIL, and all these college kids are making money, and it's going to be the downfall. Now it won't take it to its knees, but it's going to degrade the how competitive it is, because you're going to have just a few people that's going to have the money to get the best players.
Talk about that. I mean, what does that do to your ability to recruit, say, even at a big school like Auburn versus Alabama, where now they've got a bunch of national champions and it's the feeder program to the NFL, right? Between that and Georgia or whatever it may be. Does it make that disparity grow a lot further, where there's 2 or 3 teams that are just going to be the only ones that can be dominant, and that's it?
Well, you're going to have several teams in the big leagues in college that's going to be able to make it. The problem is you've got 400 other Division II teams. If they get a good player, they're going to take money and go to one of the better teams. And so you're not going to be able to build a team. It's going to take away from a lot of the smaller schools, 1AA schools as we used to call them. Joe Manchin and I have got a bill we're getting ready to start pushing that's going to basically do 4 or 5 basic things to try to help the NCAA because they're afraid of lawsuits. And one is this transfer, where we're letting kids transfer and play immediately, when most of the time when I coached, if you transferred, fine, but you had to sit out a year. Okay, you had to take a penalty.
Did you lose a year of eligibility, or did you just have to push it off for a year?
Well, it depended. You got 4 years, and you can play. You can be there 5. So if you could still get that 4th year unless you were kind of end of your time. But we're teaching kids to quit. Hey, when times get tough, I don't like this coach, or he's making me do too much, or we're working too hard. My buddies at this other school say we're not doing it, so I'm going to go to this other school. So that's not what this country is about. This country is about going and doing your job, doing your duty, working as a team, learning time management, work ethic, and all those things.
I see both sides. I mean, I do see, hey, a lot of these schools making tens and hundreds of millions of dollars off of the players who couldn't do anything. So, I mean, I get a component of it, but I think the point you just brought up is actually the scary one, which is like, I don't want to put in the work. This guy's going to give me more money to do that. I mean, I think what made a lot of the great players is having a great coach, someone who pushed them out of their comfort zone. And I think, for better or worse, in today's sort of instant gratification world, if it's like, wow, take $10 million from this, it's like, I could be done for life.
Yeah, and we've got money involved in it. And one thing that we're trying to put back into it is when you go to college, you go for what? You go for an education. Now you're not, if you start transferring for money, you're not going to get a degree. It's not going to happen. And so what we're doing is we're putting money in it, and parents are taking money. And actually what a lot of these kids are doing, all the money goes to the parents, and the kid doesn't get anything. And so
that's where a lot of this abuse, you're going to see lawsuits. This is going to be this is going to be a problem.
And there's contracts that are broken, and so there's really no rules or regulations right now. It's kind of the wild, wild west, and we're trying to get it under control. But listen, I'm for players making money because it's hard what they do. It's the only time in their life they'll have 2 full-time jobs. Going to school, academics, tutors, and all that, and then you got to turn around and you got to go work and practice for a crazy coach and spend a lot of time with lifting weights, going to meetings, practicing. It's a lot to it. So I'm for them making money, but I tell you, I'm not for 2 or 3 on a team making money and the rest of them not making any. I'm for all of them getting a piece of pie. I can see that creating a problem
also, right? There's some bitterness. I could even see it in the sense that, these are also young kids, right? They're pissed off. This guy's, driving a Ferrari, and we're not like, hey, I'm just going to miss that block.
It happened. It happened to teams last year. We call it a bad locker room. You go in there and nobody talks to each other. They're mad at each other. Well, I'm playing, but he's making $500,000 and I'm making $100,000. Well, wait a minute. How come I'm the starter and he's not, but he's getting more money? And so that creates a terrible locker room, and the whole object is to win, to win games.
Yeah, I can see it again in a contact sport like football.
Right.
Someone misses a block on purpose to level the playing field for them. I mean, but it can happen. I mean, this is an 18-year-old kid. You know what I mean? Like, who knows what's going through their minds? This is, you wish they wouldn't do that, but I can't say that. I don't know how many kids are playing college football, but it's thousands.
Thousands.
And it's going to happen, and that could be devastating to people as well.
Well, there's 2 things left in our society where kids get disciplined, because a lot of our kids nowadays have one or no parent, because of this generation. For some reason, the Democrats have fought the nuclear family, and it busted.
They've incentivized almost,
where you can make money.
You
can make money if you're not married.
Bigger
and all
programs and more money.
But the 2 areas that's really kept us together is military. You can go get discipline and hard work. You can learn all that, and sports. You can do the same thing. You can, but everybody can't do it. But a lot of these young men and women learn, to work with other people and do things right and know when things get tough, how to get up off the ground and go again. We're ruining all that. And we talked about the military earlier. Now we're talking about sports. What do we got left? We don't have family, we don't have sports, and we're not going to have military to take thousands of kids into. And
well, they're getting rid of God too. I mean, as evidenced by the LA Dodgers. I mean, that if
gone.
they're comfortable doing that,
yeah.
You know what I mean? That's like, again, I don't think they would do it if it was Muslim or Hindu or anyone else, but to attack sort of the Christian faith in that specific instance,
30%
Catholics
maybe.
That way.
We're maybe Christian in this country now, maybe 30%. And hopefully, it's a little bit more than that. But and this country was built on Christian faith, and of course,
and
a lot of the
Judeo-Christian
Democrats
values,
fight it every day.
These are common things, but there's a flagrant attack on that.
Right.
So, what were the moments from coaching? What are the moments that stood out to you most? What's the most memorable experience there?
Well, I enjoyed seeing young men start from almost nothing and have nothing to being very successful, and them learning how to work. Again, you come from high school, you think, man, I've made it. I'm going into college, and it's just now getting started.
Oh, yeah.
And they look around the first day they're there, man, these guys are big, they're strong, they're fast. Well, they weren't. When they were your age, they were starting on a weight program, and they were starting to learn how to play the game and learn how to be a good person. And so it was good to see kids. I recruited Ray Lewis, for instance, up here in Orlando, Kathleen High School in Lakeland. And one parent, very raw kid, nobody hardly recruited him. Yep. He ended up being one of the best players ever. But Ray Lewis wanted out. Michael Irvin the same way. Michael Irvin, when he
wanted out, like in college,
no, he wanted out of what he grew up in.
Okay, yeah.
He had a bunch.
He was hungry.
He was hungry.
Yeah.
He wanted a better life for him and his mom and his brothers and sisters, and they worked to get to that point, and they earned it. And so, to me, that was the most enjoyable thing, is to watch kids go from one to the other. I had a guy one time called Dwayne Johnson. Played. You know who Dwayne Johnson is?
No, yeah.
Huh? Dwayne Johnson was at Miami, played. I was a defensive coordinator, and he wanted to be a wrestler. Well, Dwayne Johnson's a rock. He ended up being a wrestler, a pretty good one. Yeah. But he being an actor really put him to the point where obviously makes millions and millions. But I really enjoyed seeing kids, not just kids like that went on to make all pro.
To be excellent at football, but to just
but
be
to
good
go
at
have
life,
a great life, and knew how to work and put time in, and knew if they had to be there at 5, hey, you better be there at 5. So many of these kids don't know time restraints anymore. They don't understand.
Did you see the discipline change? You did it for a long time. I mean, did you see that sort of level of discipline change, or did the great ones always have that discipline, and was that a standout factor?
You would see some that you'd have. That's one of your most disappointing things, to see a kid come in with all this talent, and they didn't put it to use. I mean, they thought they were to the promised land, and they didn't want to work out on weights, and they thought, hey, I'm here, let's get it done, instead of earning their spurs and really doing what they needed to make themselves even better than what they were. That was hard, but we're starting to you start to see the lack of discipline. But the thing about it, again, most in this country, high school football programs I'd go to, they were hard nosed. I mean, you can't be football and not be hard nosed, and because you're not winning many games, the coach is going to get fired. Yeah. And so that's one thing that, as I said earlier, sports and men and women have really helped this country maintain the leadership, dedication, and the work ethic they need to make it through life. Well,
it's sort of the ultimate meritocracy, right? Which is why it's so interesting that sports has been so politicized, because it's the opposite, right? When the NFL taking their woke positions on these things. Well, listen, if the guy's not the best, like if you're not Tom Brady, you're not starting. Like if you have Tom Brady, that guy's going to be the guy that's starting, because there's so much on the line. And yet, it's always interesting watching sort of that's the key tenet of the entire game in that, and yet the sort of issues they espouse, the issues they take, are actually sort of the opposite of that in real life.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The irony is sort of, you know what I mean? Like that would never fly Like
Oh, yeah.
you wouldn't be an NFL team. You'd lose money, and then therefore you wouldn't exist, and therefore it wouldn't happen. And yet, feels like they're pushing that stuff outside of their ecosphere, but not within.
It's happening more than you think, but it's, you know, if you just look back at sports, how people have, you know, came from nothing. You know, O.J. Simpson, you know, running back in my day, watching one of the greatest ever to play, you know, he got cut from his 8th grade football team. You know, wouldn't let him play, wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And look where he ended up. And, you know, if you look at guys that I'm friends with, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, they're not great athletes. They made themselves into quarterbacks here because they
Tom Brady
outthought
went,
the other
like
team.
7th round, something like that. Like
Yeah.
it was funny.
Now they could throw the ball.
Oh, yeah.
But
Well-
they didn't have the legs that some of these kids have nowadays to get
But there
out
was
of-
something
yeah.
different, right? Like I was there with a bunch of buddies of mine who I affectionately call massholes. We were watching a Patriots game the day Drew Bledsoe was taken out. Mm-hmm. And again, these were grown men from Boston, like in tears that their guy, maybe not the greatest ever, but he sort of carried the franchise a little bit for a while, and they're in their tears because this guy that was warming up the bench, Tom Brady, was going to now be their quarterback, and like I'm sitting there like, well, who would have known that was sort of the start of a dynasty of probably the greatest quarterback in NFL history?
He was, and of course we forget about a lot of them over the years, and they call him, the GOAT, greatest of all time. And probably in the last 20 years, you could match him up against Joe Montana, who was really, really good. Roger Staubach in his day was really, really good. Terry Bradshaw, really. So, but all those guys made themselves into players because they understood the only way you can get there is be dedicated to the job. And that's the reason they were successful. And it just, again, I just hate to see the road that we're taking in sports right now in a lot of areas to where it's more about money than it is about making yourself better.
How'd you get into it to begin with?
I played high school, played college, and then a small school in Arkansas. And then I decided, a coach is really somebody that doesn't want to grow up. Really, it's true. And so you can't play, but what's the next best thing? You're going to coach. Yeah. And so I got into it on the high school level, and then I got into it on the college level, and then Jimmy Johnson hired me down in Miami in 1985. Wow. And that was kind of my break. And I didn't move a whole lot compared to, I've known guys that have moved 15, 20 times in their career. I only moved like 6 or 7, which was good. But it's, I enjoy sports. Mm-hmm. I enjoy everything outdoors, hunting, fishing, sports. I wasn't a rocket scientist. I didn't study like my 2 boys are very smart, but they worked at it because their mom made it. One of them's actually
a rocket scientist,
yeah.
I think, right?
Yeah, really. But I got up every day, done, and enjoyed going to work.
Yeah.
Now, this new job I've got, I can't say that 100%. I'm glad, like I told you, I'm glad I'm there. But my goodness, I mean, it's something different every day.
Well, but I think the same sort of stuff applies, right? The strategy that you used to become a winning coach in football. I mean, it is politics is strategy. I mean, there's a lot of it to it. It's not just going in and stamping something. I mean, how aligned is sort of the strategy or the mentality of the strategy that you used in football to win games the same as moving the ball forward in politics?
And I tell people this: the one thing that's common denominator for everything that we do in life is you have to sell yourself to other people. I mean, they can figure out a phone in a heartbeat. You got to be able to communicate, but you got to be able to sell yourself to 3 or 4 people on the Democratic side to get a bill passed. Mm-hmm. You're going to get most people on your side. You got to sell that. But there's no different. When I went into somebody's home in Detroit, had parents sitting there, kid, I need you to come to Auburn. Why should you go to Auburn, Coach? Well, if they don't believe in you first, they're not going to send him to your school. So you got to sell yourself. And so for any advice I can give to any young people out there is, learn to sell yourself to other people by communicating what you're about and who you are.
I mean, it's interesting you say that because the 2 sort of other senators that you talked about are on the other today, are on the other side of the aisle, whether it's Fetterman or Manchin. So yeah, I guess that's right. I mean, we forget that we sort of pick that sides, but I think sometimes we do have to figure out how to make that work. Otherwise, we are going to be in a perpetual stalemate, especially when you talk about a Congress where we have a 4-seat majority in the House and, I guess a 1-seat minority in the Senate.
Right.
I mean, these things are so close. If you can do that, you can actually flip that.
Oh yeah.
Flip that in our favor fairly well.
But you got to sell yourself. They got to believe in you.
Yeah.
Joe Manchin and I have worked on this NIL bill for a year, and of course we've got to be pretty close because of it. I worked with Tim Kaine, Krista Sinema. Worked with them on bills, and there's some of them I can't work with.
Yeah.
Well,
listen, I hear the words coming out of some of their mouths. And I was like, I understand. Well, so speaking of negotiations and getting something back, I heard the Biden administration's now pushing back on removing, I guess, Space Force was going to be located in Alabama.
Space Command.
And
Yeah. Your dad put Space Command in Huntsville, but he started Space Force.
Yeah.
And President Trump was smart enough to understand the next war is probably going to be won or lost in space.
Of course it will. Between satellites and this,
exactly. And so, in Alabama, we've got a place called Huntsville that most people hadn't been.
Mm-hmm.
But let me tell you something. We got what we call the Redstone Arsenal. It's 40,000 troops behind a wall. We have the Missile Defense Agency. We protect the world with missile defense from Huntsville. We have 600 or 700 defense contractors. We build everything from rockets to tanks. And we have obviously NASA. Yep. We have probably at least 30-40% now of the FBI. We just built them new buildings behind Redstone Arsenal, all their cybersecurity. We have ULA, SpaceX, Blue Origin, you name it space-wise, it's in Huntsville. Mm-hmm. And President Trump put the Secretary of Air Force in charge and said, you find the best place for it. They looked at 60 places. Huntsville won it, hands down. And of course, when Biden gets into office, he's talked into doing a re-review.
Well, the re-review was based on basically Alabama's policy on abortion, which, doesn't have much to do with space, but that doesn't stop the Democrats from radicalizing it and, again, trying to punish people for not just going along with everything that they want. So how do we hold them accountable?
Well, that's an excuse because you do have military bases in Florida where your abortions laws are just like ours. Mm-hmm. Same thing in Texas. So if they're going to start moving all military bases...
The bastions of most military, frankly, they're not really in the liberal states, with the exception of maybe California, just because it's so big. But
listen, if I'm an American, and if I was a senator from Alabama, and I truly thought the best place for us to save our world would be to move Space Command and have it in Colorado, hey, let's go do it. But it's not. And we did it the right way, and it was done the right way. And if anybody, and I've invited President Biden, I don't know whether he's ever been to Huntsville or not, to see what.
Listen, if he was there, he wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
You just tell him he's been there a number of times. Tell him he loved it. He'll probably give it to you because he doesn't know the difference.
But I'm a senator from Alabama, but I'm also a senator for the country, and I want us to be well protected because I can see it coming because Chinese are building satellites right and left. Russia's building them. Iran's building them. And they know how to shoot satellites out of space now. Russia did it 2 years ago for some stupid reason. We got space debris all over up there, but we have a lot of smart people they're involved in that. A lot smarter than I am. But I've looked at all the reviews and it's hands down. But it's gotten political, and that's what this administration's done. It's made it all political.
Well, we appreciate you being in that fight. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you like and share this content. Make sure you're supporting Senator Tuberville in all of his things. Even if you're an Alabama fan, obviously, I think he loves America, above all. Yeah. Even above that rivalry, maybe. I don't know. I don't want to get you into too much trouble because I know it's close.
I love living in this country. I've been all over other places, and you have too. Yeah. And I'm always glad to come home.
Well, we appreciate you doing it.
Thank you.
Guys, again, like, share, subscribe on Rumble so other people can see this programming. Make sure to go check out our great sponsors as well, supporting the companies that support us and the things that we believe in. Go check out Goldco by going to donjuniorgold.com. Learn how to diversify your portfolio. Learn how to protect against inflation, the insanity going on in our interest rate system, the woke DEI and ESG things that are going into the decisions in your retirement portfolio. Just learn about it. Learn how to hedge against the insanity. Go to donjuniorgold.com and also check out the guys at Secure Private Data. We understand what's going on. We see the privacy under attack. We see the FBI literally spying on us. What was it, 260,000 people just this week. We see what's going on, and we certainly can't trust big tech or, frankly, these days, unfortunately, big government. Sorry, sir. I got it. It's true. It's true, and I think you believe it. So I think you understand. So it's secure. It's spelled SEKUR. Private offering for email, VPN, instant messaging, and otherwise, and they allow you to communicate and go online privately without the fear of spying from big tech, your internet service provider, or your email provider, or even hackers. So go to Secure. Go to donjuniorSecure.com. That's DONJRSEKUR. A little bit different spelling, where you can get a 15% discount on any of their solutions for the next 5 years. Again, guys, thanks for being here. I'm going to flip over to locals. If you have the Ask Me Anything, I'll be on there in a couple of minutes. Thanks for all you guys do. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you on Monday, guys. Have a great weekend and enjoy your Memorial Day.